So the drama gets ever more dramatic as a new front opens up in the political conflict in Rivers State. And the more the conflict advances and deepens, the more fear it creates among the people of Rivers State in particular and Nigerians in general. It's a conflict that's imprisoned the two main combatants, Governor Sim Fubara and Minister Nyesom Wike, at least in their minds, and the tighter and more constricted the space, the more likely they are to seek higher ground from which to protect themselves and to lash out. Since last year, Governor Fubara has been battling to loosen the brutal Wike stranglehold that's choking him. But each time, Mr. Wike comes back with a new arsenal of weaponry from among his loyalists, who seem to dominate every government space in Rivers State. But slowly, Governor Fubara has been steadily increasing his own might and has been more assertive in holding his front line. And as his ambitions to properly seize and control the reins of his office widen, so is his confidence growing. And now he's announced what some analysts say could make a crucial difference and tip the scales in his favor: the launch of a major judicial probe into the management of the state's resources under the previous administration headed by Nyesom Wike. So as the bets come off in this political battle for dominance, and this planned probe becomes the central front line in Governor Fubara's war effort against Mr. Wike, could this be the twist in the tale that will restore sanity and calm to Rivers State?
When I said that I had a reason for being patient, it is because I know that we are all from one family. And if we have a disagreement, no matter how bad it is, it should be resolved. But it has become very clear that this disagreement, there is no headway to it. And for a lot of reasons, there are very, very visible evidence that there is sabotage, deliberate attempt to sabotage this administration. You have a big tax. As it is today, in the local parliament, they said the jungle has matured. We will be setting a panel of inquiry to investigate the affair of governance.
That's Governor Sim Fubara there. He was speaking during the swearing in of a new Attorney General in Rivers State. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the political analyst and executive director of Development Specs Academy, Professor Ikechukwu, who's a member of the editorial board of This Day newspaper and is also a professor of strategic management and human capital development. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure.
I haven't seen you in a while.
Certainly.
You look like you've lost a bit of weight.
So have you, Charles.
Well, let's start a mutual admiration club.
Oh, okay then.
But let's turn to Rivers State. It looks like the gloves are off and the governor is fighting back, and the drama appears to be entering a new, some said perhaps more dangerous phase with this announcement that there will be a probe of the Wike administration. What do you make of it all?
First, I do not think the gloves are off. That's, in other words, that the gloves just came off. The gloves were always off. People were not looking. Because that agreement they tried to craft here in Abuja, contrived. If you recall, I was on this program at that time and I said it wasn't going anywhere. The presidency would eventually have enough problems of its own. And you know, all of that, power politics. Now, here is a sitting governor, ostensibly put in place by the man before him, and who demanded and expected and still expects loyalty, but whom it appeared wanted to also be running the government on his behalf and issuing instructions. Now that led to disagreements. And I thought the disagreement was not a very smart thing on the part of the former governor, because you're taking on the man who was in charge of your finances, who knew where all the bones were buried.
He was the accountant general.
He was the accountant general of the state. And you had previously informed Nigerians in a fit of rage how you were the one who bought, I think, forms for all those who contested. Even that alone is a matter on which somebody will ask, well, sir, so where did you get all this money from? Among other things. So Now they've tried to paper over a presumed agreement and understanding is not working. So Fubara has opened up all the flanks. And I think the person who stands a disadvantage in the line of fire is Wike, and I'll tell you why. You see, in politics, you must know when you're talking about, you must make a distinction whether you want to be in power or you want to be in office. Supposing two of us are ministers under the Tinubu government, but anytime you feel like you'll go and see the president. Anytime I want to see the president, I come through you. I'm in office as minister, you're in office as minister, but in addition, you're in power. Now, Wike as governor was in power within a space and had unlimited funds. Today, he's a minister whose spending profile is circumscribed by the presidency. He's one of the aides of the presidency in a presidential system. His capacity for discretion is limited. He's also far away from River State. And so Fubara has had time to deploy both presence, proximity, and financial muscle to begin to retweak a lot of things. And I think as it is, like you said, yeah, the gloves are off. The gloves were always off because at the point of that agreement, both parties were implacable. It was a third party that appeared to tell them, listen, learn to be of good behavior. Now, there's a difference between refusing to punch and not desiring to punch. Now, we've seen that it was not a refusal to punch. They all held their punches. Now, Fubara thinks he's gotten into a very comfortable space from which he can land what you call a soccer punch. And there it has come. Yeah.
Well, fascinating, really, isn't it? And very interesting analysis from you. So it sounds like not only is, I mean, as you said, the gloves were always off, but I mean, it sounds like, at least publicly, Governor Fubara is now not only asserting himself in a much more muscular way, but it sounds as if he's unequivocally rejected any sort of compromise between himself and his political godfather, Nyesom Wike. And that means it's a completely different kettle of fish.
Totally different kettle of fish. It's what you call in local parlance, fight to the finish. Now, here is a man who has said, it's like he has told himself, look, what else do I have to lose? I am concerned that to these 2 or 3 levels. At the first level, this must not undermine the expected benefits of governance for River State people. So whatever Fubara is doing, he must make sure the machinery of government is working. At the second level, the concern is about Wike. And I make a distinction between leaders who are on the national grid and politicians, or leaders who are on UPS. Wike right now is on UPS. In other words, when the main electricity is gone, you plug onto a temporary supply of power. The day that power is unplugged, all the lights will go blank. Now, Wike is plugged onto the presidency. That's not the national grid. Fubara is closer to the national grid. And you take the experience of Obasanjo. You know, he came on, when he won the election in 1999, remember he made an announcement that all those who funded the election should please not expect to come and take Nigeria's money. It was their investment in the national, and the party fired back. Now what am I leading up to? The crux of the analysis is that Wike right now has a higher level of political dependency than the man he's fighting, and also a limited supply of funds, and the more limited supply of funds than the man he's fighting. And it doesn't seem to me as if he's making very many friends that will run out on his behalf. And Fubara is claiming, speaking of sabotage, he's speaking of, so for him to come out so boldly and so openly, my other question would be, is the presidency not watching all of this? What could embolden him so much, except perhaps there's a growing understanding that, look, we might lose a lot of mileage if we continue on this path. Because you recall, yesterday, or was it the day before, the spokesman for the president, spokesperson came out and said that, look, the president is not involved in this. Anybody expecting that the president will come and back him up is mistaken. We are leaving this guy, sort it out well. And that comes to the next level of, what you call power dysfunctionality that leads to sacrifice. Namely, yeah, you did a lot of things for us. We're happy about it. You've been our man, but you're becoming more of a liability. And so I imagine there will be a few more voices telling the president or the friends of Wike that, don't you think this fellow is becoming a little bit of a headache? What wonderful mileage
I think that's putting it rather mildly.
Very mildly, what wonderful mileage are we making from him to warrant the flack we are getting? If you ask me personally, I think the work he's doing in the roads in Abuja, for instance, is fantastic. So that's at the purely personal level. But at the level of national politics, stable polity, power politics
and
in particular.
Statesmanship.
Are we gaining or losing mileage with this man? Only the presidency will answer that question. And my suspicion is that Wike probably either doesn't have the right combination or cocktail of advisors, or he is his own advisor with his ears plugged.
Well, I suppose a lot of people might argue that the latter is probably the case. But I mean, you know a lot about these things, broadly speaking, as someone who analyzes political developments on a regular basis and in a comprehensive way. How much is ethnicity and its ugly footprint a factor in this unceasing struggle for supremacy between Wike and Fubara? Because some people have suggested that is in fact the case in Rivers State.
Well, I recall that when the controversy first broke, there's this lady, a very popular actress, highly respected. I don't remember her name at the moment. She made a short video which was distributed all over the country.
She's from Rivers.
Yes, yes.
Right.
And that, no, we're not going to tolerate this. Fubara is our brother. She went on, and then went on. There was this line that stuck in my head, and I couldn't stop laughing. That now they will see that the blood, where is Fubara from?
He's Ijaw.
The Ijaw blood in Fubara will now boil over. They will know he has Ijaw blood. So the three people I was watching with, I started like, they say, why are you laughing? I said, listen, there's always been Ijaw blood in Fubara. There's one kind of blood in one person or the other. So let's not start getting excited about blood. The thing is that there are issues on the table that need to be resolved for good governance. Now, Wike's ethnic extraction inclines more towards the Igbo. The Ijaw ethnic extraction is different. Of course, you know that if you're to even push it further, there's a further crisis of another crisis within the family tree. Wike, what language is it? It's a bastardization of Wike, son of Ike. And our history shows when that began to change during the war and all of that. And so you then find that if you're talking strictly ethnicity, Fubara might have a slight advantage of indigenship to the extent that your ancestry can be traced outside
and
of
the
that.
Ijaws are the majority in Rivers
They are the
State.
majority.
Yeah.
Very likely, from all indications, the fourth largest ethnic group in Nigeria, resilient people, etc. Not always on top for all kinds of reasons, but now their man has come on top. He came out cool, calm, level-headed. He probably played dead long enough in order to get. Now he's gotten it. That's the wrongest kind of person to take on. A patient, thorough, detailed person. That agreement is signed. I was on this program. I told you it wasn't going to take anybody anywhere.
Well, let's talk about that agreement a little bit, very briefly, because we want to talk about other things. That intervention by President Tinubu that resulted in both sides putting their imprimatur on that agreement.
Yes.
That agreement, some have now come to say that the president needs to pull back from it, and that in fact he is pulling back from it for the simple reason that it was fundamentally flawed because it failed to address the legality of the state assembly lawmakers who are defected and whose defection has major legal consequences.
No, it was fairly obvious. The document was painfully, in my view, scandalous. It didn't have integrity as an attempt to resolve a serious issue. The parties could have been assumed to have been given this document to sign, not that they sat together and put it out. If the law, all the way from the court of first instance to the Supreme Court, has said that when you leave a political party, you lose membership. In other words, you cease to be an elected representative of the people since you've left the platform on which they elected you. To that extent, would it be ridiculous to expect that the matter will end on a scrap of paper that has neither, judicial nor political significance? And so what many expected after that document was that people will go, settle out of court, get out of this and say, listen, there's no way for this, there's no way for this. You begin negotiations, you begin to think of. That didn't happen. People were holding on to very strong grounds, wrongly so. And so what it has led to is that the porosity of that agreement has emerged, and Fubara is now bringing in the full weight of the law. And nobody seemed to have learned anything among the lawmakers, because many were strengthening the very loyalties that led to this agreement and that led to the frivolous document. And so you're now saying, well, fine, you guys are no longer lawmakers. Well, that's where he has to be careful. Because, you know, there's a subsisting judgment, and then it had to do with Ladoja sometime in it's held in the judiciary that the House cannot sit and be seen to be sitting in any location other than where it's supposed to have its business.
Yeah, but some would argue that that part of it is secondary. I mean, the primary thing is who are the people who are actually
no. I thought I already settled that.
Right.
Because those who are to sit is settled by the fact that those who have defected are no longer by lawmakers.
Right. But let me pursue that side of it. I mean, I know you're not a lawyer, but you are a legal expert and you're a political analyst, and the two kind of, in this particular case, they're rubbing up against each other. The question that is still being asked is whether the loss of their seats as a result of their defection is automatic, or would their seats still need to go through the process of being declared vacant and their continued presence in the House of Assembly unlawful by a court in order for that constitutional provision on defection to properly take effect?
I'll take it from this angle. There is the law, there is jurisprudence. You know, yes, I'm not a lawyer, but I taught jurisprudence for students of law. And you usually look for the spirit of it. If you say, I'm now no longer in a position to occupy this seat, what in substantive terms are you saying? The question is, does it become automatic? Does there have to be another pronouncement? And my response to that will be, what is the intent of the Constitution in saying that by action A, B is the consequence? There is no conditional, yes, B is the consequence if. There's no if. So here is a question of exclusive affirmation, not an extended, not an inclusive one where there might be conditionality. So my reading of it, but it will be the cause that will determine finally, my personal reading of it is that they are out, and their chance for a political solution was lost in the process of making trouble. And to that extent, and also from the angle of power politics, is likely to be in the interest of all parties concerned to bury them. Because the question will be, who can we sacrifice at the moment? If you say you want to sacrifice Fubara, you will have an ungovernable River State. If you say you're going to sacrifice Wike, it will appear to be unfair given the job he did for them, good or bad. So what kind of soft landing would you find for him? That sort of thing might work. But where there is real concern and source of terror will be that probe.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll get to that in a little bit, hopefully, again, before we end the chat. But what about the political parties, the APC and the PDP? How do you assess their role in all of this?
No, I thought PDP already took its position from day one. The moment they defected, they said, look, you're no longer members of our party. And I don't see the party trying to backpedal on that or backtrack. APC, too, has not done enough to offer them protection. I think they were a bit laid back about that. It presents the PDP with the opportunity to take itself seriously. The challenge we've been having with the opposition is that you don't really have a political opposition. You have members of parties other than APC that make comments on national issues, usually not in favor of APC, but there is no structured response. If I was part of the PDP, what I will do is to develop a structured response, call a party meeting that unfortunately we've lost some members. Please, let's start preparing for election so that we win back those seats.
Right. Now, let's talk about that election bit. I was hoping you'd get to it. The Electoral Commission, INEC, should they have waded into the crisis, as some have suggested, and declared the seats vacant and started moves towards organizing an election? Or are they right to hold back and wait for a judicial pronouncement on the matter?
I imagine, I may be mistaken, but I imagine that it would be the duty of INEC to wait for a judicial pronouncement. Yes, yes, that would be the reasonable thing to do. These seats are now declared vacant, and there has to be an election. I would have been surprised if INEC jumped forward. It's
Right.
not within its brief.
Okay, well, let's park that for the moment, and let's talk about the political side of things, because beyond the legality or not of all of this, whether the governor should be left to get on with the job of governing, is there an important element here that goes against the grain of politics, not just in Nigeria, but everywhere? And that is that the bedrock of politics and political parties and associations and political leadership and followership is loyalty. In other words, the governor promises to be loyal to the people and vice versa, and people support other people politically on the basis of loyalty. And on that basis, they help you get elected. And if you turn around and wag your finger at them and tell them to go to hell, that raises fundamental questions about trust, doesn't it? Because trust is at the heart of politics and governance, isn't it?
I agree. But let's locate loyalty, political loyalty, where it belongs. If political loyalty is, Charles is loyal to Oke because Oke spent his resources to make Charles governor, so that when Charles becomes governor, Oke will make money off the state. That is criminality. If I become...
But nobody has said that there's any evidence that that's what happened.
I'm not saying there's evidence.
Yeah.
I'm saying if the basis is this sort of thinking, then something is wrong.
Right.
And you have a duty to tell whoever it is to go to hell. But let's look at the development. Now, loyalty. Political loyalty has always been part of political history, including our own national history. But what was loyalty to? Loyalty was to the party ideology. In other words, Aoists were loyal to the action group philosophy of education, blah, blah, blah.
Social welfare.
Social welfare. The PRP, Aminu Kanu's people had their own, the NP. So godfatherism was a process of nurturing a replacement generation that would drive the philosophy.
And the ideology.
Thank you.
That's
That
a
is
very
it.
solid
And you see
point.
that there's a link. If you take it to the religious tradition, your godfather, his business is to ensure that he monitors you and that you keep to the faith. That's why he could sometimes come and flog you, or the parents will report you. He's your guardian angel to ensure you're on the right track spiritually. Now, the godfather, the person that Amadu Bello will recommend to Ezek or an opera will be somebody who, that young man, in the next 5 years, he could be party secretary. Now, that's godfatherism. That's loyalty to the ideology. But you have a bunch of highwaymen who broke into the political arena, took violent possession of the state, because these other people I mentioned, they created GRAs for without intending to embarrass you. Your father, your family lived in Opera Avenue, no more here. Emma Opera didn't have a plot of land there. That was exclusive GRA. The one Hassan Katsina created in Kanu, another had Hassan Katsina, no, the Pamsek 2 plots. Now you have a new, highwaymen who sprang onto the political arena. Anything in sight, including people's chicken, they pluck. To that extent, then, loyalty becomes, this thing I've taken, I like to keep it. Not only am I keeping some, but I like to keep the flow continuous. So please stay there. Let me use your hand to keep plucking pear from the fire. Now, that's where I would say this loyalty is mandatory.
Yeah. But that has become the order of the day, the norm in this country. So given that, and in a country where obfuscation is the order of the day, and the rich and powerful get their way either through the courts or through the sheer size and strength of their political muscle, do you think it is possible that Governor Fubara may end up being removed through some underhanded means?
Well, his election is consolidated at the Supreme Court. So whatever underhand, like impeachment, the impeachment has to be by a viable state assembly, for which there's none at the moment, and he's trying to reconfigure it, and everybody must be weighing his options. Fubara is sitting on the state that gets probably the highest monthly earnings from oil, and the oil is still flowing, and it's spent at his discretion, and he handled the funds. He knew how he knows what he can do with money. And in an environment where integrity's deficit is measured by the volume of cash with which you approach people who claim they have integrity, he has the SEC in it for that. So to that extent, all things considered on the table, his removal is not only going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, but actually not advisable at all. Because
Right, but as the two sides size each other up and go for each other, which is essentially what they're doing now. I mean, could all this lead to it? Because I mean,
state of emergency?
Yeah, well, a state of disorder that could spill onto the streets in River State. Because I mean, Wike clearly has a lot of
He has some following, I agree, but you see,
yeah,
it will not. It could lead, but the chances are lower because that support is also weighing its possible losses. Who is the federal government supporting? But over and above all of that, some people have even hinted at the possibility of a state of emergency if it gets bad enough, but I have no worries in that regard for a simple reason. Probably somebody who has mental issues is the person who will declare state of emergency in River State. You'll be routed. The losses to the national security forces will be humongous. It's a risk nobody can afford. Totally. Every day you get reports that, oh, we've destroyed 17 illegal refineries, right? 3 weeks later, you destroy 50 in the same environment in a land area that in some communities are slightly about the size of Hilton in Abuja. So it tells you the impenetrability of the terrain, the limited understanding of those dealing with it, and the celebration of episodic encounters with self-replicating acts of disruption. And so the challenge remains, you know. Okay, so as it is then, the question that will be asked is, what extent can anybody say that this whole thing, it can be resolved in that way? It can't, you know.
Right, so let me ask you this. I'm just being told that there's a bit of a problem with my microphone battery, so that's why they're fiddling around.
I thought so.
That disconcerted you. Yeah. You were wondering
what's going on. Has Fubara, has the Rivers people come here?
Under the table. I'm raising my voice so that your microphone can pick mine up. Okay, well, I'm told that I'm back on, so I can, you know, we can sort of level things out. I mean, it's been brilliant chatting with you, but let's return briefly to that probe before we go. Wike and his supporters will clearly see that action as a deepening of the breach of trust, won't they?
No, it's more than a deepening of breach. It's actually what you might call the home run to destruction. This is it. Look. He's making all this trouble. He's moving around. We know, like I said earlier, where the bones are buried, where the dead bodies are. We're going to bring it all up. So Wike and his supporters won't be comfortable about it. Now, this is not to say Wike did anything wrong. No. But it's possible in the course of a probe to give an interpretation to an item of expenditure, a line of action that will suggest fraud, misapplication. So it's a dangerous place to go into at all.
Yeah.
Walking into a forest, you're armed quite all right, but you didn't anticipate poisonous spiders. You had an AK-47.
You were thinking of the leopard.
Oh, the leopard
and the lion.
The lions, and then there's quicksand, you sink.
Yeah.
Now
and there's scorpions.
Scorpions, and, you know, and snakes.
Fascinating analysis.
That's the danger.
Prof, I want to thank you very much indeed. It's always brilliant getting the benefit of your... and don't look at your watch. Professor Ikechukwu is a political analyst, executive director of Development Specs Academy, member of the editorial board of this day newspaper, and a professor of strategic management and human capital development. And you can see why he's got all these titles, haven't you? Thank you very much indeed.